Right, evening everyone. My name's Harry Henderson, and I'm going to take you through the AHDB monthly webinar. Tonight we're going to be talking about autumn cultivations and winter crop establishment. But I think when I was putting all of these slides together, it will just become establishment and cultivations. Really, truly, you know, it will hopefully focus your mind on what you're going to do over the next coming months. And it will give you a bit of thought, food for thought for the spring crops next spring as well. So welcome all. We'll just go through a few housekeeping. You're all on mute. You should be all able to hear me, but you won't be able to talk to me. There will be questions at the end. As I say, we'll be able to do questions at the end. We've got an hour and a half set aside to do this, so we're looking at an 8:30 finish, but it could be sooner. We'll see. I've got 40 slides for you to go through and discuss, so we'll see how those go. I want to get them done, you know, pretty quick, and then we can open the floor up for some questions. It will be recorded. We'll get it recorded and then put it on our YouTube channel as per normal, and where all the other webinars exist as well. There will be basis points applied for. If you've already registered, you should be able to just put your basis details in. If you haven't, then you can put them in the chat function, and Christian, who's working away in the background in York, will record those and get those points applied to you. If you want to tweet, it's AHDB Arable Tech, and that's me. But we'll have a survey at the end of it if you want to add any comments. And it's important really that you complete the survey if you like it. If you didn't, if you want to see more topics like this covered. When I was putting these slides together, it transpired that I had a couple of emails saying, well, are you going to do phosphate, and are you going to do nutrient cycling? And you think, oh, this could explode into more and more things. So if you want to see those sorts of things, the sort of stuff I haven't covered, then put it in the survey, and we'll get it covered in due course. As a rough agenda, really, we just want to look into a little bit of harvest progress, just out of interest, really. We'll look at assessing your soils, restructuring soils. We'll talk about direct drilling, strip tilling, and no-till drilling as well. We'll look in tire pressures, getting the best from your tire technology, ballasting, and weed control considerations as well. I think the world is turning to believe that everything is a holistic system, and your drilling system can influence your weed control programs, and that goes on to your yields and so forth. And I think we can talk about that. And we'll have a look at costs as well. It's very interesting, some of the information or data we're getting from our benchmarking programs that suggests that the evolvement of crop establishment isn't producing the cost savings that it perhaps could. And I think there's some thoughts around that. How do you reduce costs? How do you change your system? You may see a reduction in yield, but you do need to see a reduction in cost as well, and we can talk about that as well. So just as a quick update, really, I thought I'd just show this. This is, if you Google AHDB harvest progress, we get a report every week of the through ADAS, and this is the harvest progress. And I'm just going to switch my camera so I can increase the size of the screen for you. Makes sense. There we go. And what I wanted to show you was this is the harvest progress per year. And if I move my screen, you will see on your screen that we've got the last 6 years of harvest progress. And what I wanted to illustrate here was that the blue line that you can see that ends at just above week 7. That's this year. This is about a week ago. This was updated about the 24th of August, so it's a week old. I hope to get the latest data today, but just didn't quite come through today. But nevertheless, you can see where we are compared to other years. And we're not the latest. 2020 was later, 2019 was later still, but we're about average. We're just slightly below average. But you can see 2018 was a pretty clear prospect. We got done and dusted pretty quick, pretty soon. 2017 similar, 2016 similar. Now I don't know whether that's a trend. It's unlikely to be so over a 5-year period, but you can see that it's catchy weather. In the 1990s, when it was a clear long summer and you just went from one end of harvest to the other without stopping, then perhaps this graph would have been a little bit different. But it's just a bit of interest. But this is freely available to you to view and download. And there's some ideas of yields, average yields across the country as well. Similar sort of thing here. We've got the progress for the different crops. So you can see we all stops at week 7, but you've got spring barley is the least completed, then the oats, then winter wheat, and then unsurprisingly oilseed rape is almost done, and winter barley is fully done. And this is the sort of stuff that across the country, really, the sort of the data we're seeing. So tonight's update really is arable soil management. And just before COVID came along, we had a publication that was launched. This publication you can see in the middle here, all part of the AHDB Great Soils Programme, and it's arable soil management. Now we got Philip Wright, that you can see in the top left photograph, in the top left corner of the top photograph, and he did the bulk of the work. He was assisted by Andy Newbold, you can see in the high-vis jacket there, and we put this program together. And I thought it's worth really running through this to highlight this publication. It's available in hard copy. If you want to ring, there's a number you can ring via the AHDB website to get hard copies delivered, and it's available to download right now from a box you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. There's 3 documents you can see: arable soil management, cultivations and crop establishment, field drainage. I thought that's pretty important as well, and the principles of soil management. And these are 3 up-to-date publications that you can either completely read off the web on HTML web, or you can download as a PDF, or you can get as a hard copy as you please. But the 3 documents really do partner each other. It's going to be no surprise to you that the field drainage guide should be the basis of everything. Then you can look on to the arable soil management and the principles of soil management as well. They're ready for you to download as well. So that's the 3 documents that we'll focus on. One of the things that we thought that was the hidden gem of this document was the way to score your land management capabilities and your land management system at the moment. And so within this box, or within this document, there's this score sheet, and the 2 very top rows you can see rainfall and soil type. I accept that you may not be able to change those, but everything beneath, perhaps you could. Depends on your system, depends on whether you're into root crops, it depends whether you're into controlled traffic, it depends on your soil type and your rotations and so on. But it's something that you can evaluate yourself, and you can run down this sheet and just give you a score. So, for example, let's go to drainage, the 4th one down, marks out of 10, 1 to 2 points, drainage issues common, 3 to 5 points, some drainage issues, 6 to 8, well drained, low permeability, and freely drained, 9 to 10. And you can go through all of those really and mark yourself. You can see trafficking policy there: no controlled traffic, high pressure tires; no controlled traffic, low pressure tires used; some controlled traffic, and so on. And so you can evaluate yourself. Same with cover crops. There's another one, same as crop nutrition. Could I expand on cover crops? If it's something that you'd like us to cover, then we can look at that in greater detail in the future. But the idea is really you can mark yourself, and if you're thinking, yeah, weed pressure, yeah, that's mine, that's me, then you can see on the left-hand side of the page, we've got page 10. Click page 10, and it's got, from a cultivations point of view, what you can do about weeds. What is your advice? And we'll talk about ploughing, we'll talk about deep non-inversion and no-till, the whole gambit really, and to see what are your options for your particular system. But it's I think it's a bit of a hidden gem in this book that you can evaluate yourself and give yourself a score, be honest with yourself, and then it should take you to the things you think, you know, I'll probably need to address that with. In terms of you getting your total score, if it's beneath 60, then it's a varied approach. It probably understands that you might have root crops in. You may have to plough for potatoes, for roots, for veg perhaps. So occasional inversion tillage planned and within the rotation is probably something that you get into. Between 60 and 70, you could have the capability to aim to reduce tillage. Option to get into strip till perhaps if you're not already, and then above 70, it's probably marked your way that you could well significantly reduce tillage. Options to direct drill where appropriate, and we'll talk about that in greater detail. One of the things, and I accept it's a little bit late at the moment, but I thought I'd just touch on residue management. We do have a whole web page on straw. So Google ahdb.org.uk/straw, and we've got nutrient content of straw, getting more from it, straw demand, the incorporation review, and what is your value of straw? How do you weigh up between baling your straw and incorporating it? Baling it, quick bit of cash to come in. Downsides are lots of potential if it feels a little bit soft going. If it's a little bit wet, then it could be a little bit of damage and restructuring needed by the time you've got all of the straw off. But of course, if you chop all the straw, that's less income in your back pocket, and you've got straw to deal with. So the 3 photographs really, I thought, the photograph on the left, the back of the combine with the straw chopper in full chat, all sorts of straw coming out of there. You can get a fine chop, but of course we know that if you have that amount of straw getting out onto the soil surface, then you're going to start to see nitrogen lock up as this straw starts to decay. So do you chop or do you cut your crops higher, less straw going through the combine, just get on a little bit quicker? Quite possibly. At the other end of the spectrum, there's the stripper header in the middle, leaves the straw where it is, and that's gaining more interest. There's a few people up and down the country who've got themselves a stripper header as well as a conventional header, and they can romp on through a cereal crop, and they have the technology or the equipment to drill straight into that. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. And of course, straw raking. Golden rule of straw raking is if you can't bale it, you probably can't rake it either. But straw raking at an angle to the combine chopper is beneficial in terms of just moving the straw, getting it a bit more freer, and filling slag eggs as well. So I thought the best way to evaluate your soil, if you're looking at going out with a spade, it's this visual evaluation of soil structure. It's fully downloadable from our website and from the SAUC website as well. And it can come, it's best laminated if you can get it, and if you can get hold of one, then it's pretty easy to follow really. Just go out with a spade and have a look, and your own experience will know that the past history of the field, what's happened to it, how much rain has it had, how quickly did you go on the field after it's rained with the tractor, will give you an idea of where you want to be looking really. And on the other side of this, then we've got the 4 or 5 stages of soil condition, the aggregate, and the porosity, and so on. So there's a lot of information in this, and it will give you a good understanding, really, from field to field, what you need to be doing and where you need to do it. So it isn't any more complicated, or it isn't any more exciting than just going out with a spade and having a dig about and having an understanding of what you need to do. Looking down a hole, as we've done many times, you can see in both of these photographs that there's a little bit of platiness, compaction. There's some water that's trapped in here and amongst the platiness. There's some work here, so it's probably likely just to measure where this compaction is and to aim to just get if you're going to do some restructuring, get beneath that, no deeper, and try and restructure it in a minimally disturbed way. And both of these photographs really show that there's some trapped water. It's in some fairly wet soil. The soil on the right is quite clayey, so there's some restructuring probably needed there. Just going on to the basic principles, can you assess when your soil is ideal or not for so you can get ideal for loosening, ideal for cultivations, and so you get some soil at depth and just roll it in your hand. Can you make a broken sausage out of it? Ideal. If it remains in a long muddy stream, then it's probably too plastic, too wet to be driving on. And then at the other end of the scale, if it's just a fine crumb, then it's too dry for cultivation, really. There's not much you're going to do other than just stir it about a bit. But it's a quick and ready visual way of just assessing where your soils need to be. On the drier side, it's ideal for loosening, and if it's a little bit wetter, then you can make it ideal for cultivation. But you can see the friable range there as well. So it's a quick ready reckoner of where you really need to be. In terms of subsurface restructuring, when loosening soil, consider the times to achieve the vertical fissures through compacted layers, and you really want to aim for minimal disturbance on the soil surface, so you've got any weed seeds aren't disappearing down the fissures and causing you problems with emergence later on in the season. Try loosening the affected areas only. If it's just on headlands, then that's about that's all you need to really do. I don't think you need to do the whole field if there really is no need. And make sure that the moisture levels are about right. You want to stretch the soils over the wings of each leg, and to try and create vertical fissures. And don't go as deep as the tractor will have it. Go as deep as your spade has told you, and where you've seen some compaction. It can often become clear that multiple passes of cultivations have produced a pan because the cultivations have all been at the same depth. Admittedly, maybe in different directions, but they're all at the same depth, and that can create a pan underneath your cultivation depth. So when you get in there with a subsoiler, try and get in below that, but don't go any deep. Philip Wright would talk hugely about critical depth, and there's a point where the subsoiler and its wings will go down to such a point that it's now not possible for the subsoiler to lift the soil, lift and break it. It's simply smearing a pan of soil upwards, because there's too much weight of soil on the wings, and there's too much going. For sure, you might be able to pull the thing, but it's not doing any good at greater depth. So just as another illustration, really, we've got a subsoiler leg here, and you can see that the lift height of the wings is quite critical to lift and stretch and let the stretched and heaved soil drop gently back down and produce as little surface disturbance as possible. You want to create a natural system of fissures without too much disturbance. You can, if you've got too much disturbance at depth, you can leave the soil vulnerable to recompaction when it rains and when you get back out into the field. So just be careful of how you do it and the depth, really. The vertical lift height of the wings, if it's too much, the structure will be completely rearranged. The natural column strength is lost. If it's too little, then the vertical fissures are not created through the compacted layers. And it might be that you can alter the rake angle of your wings. You could try with altering the rake angle by altering the top link, but it could be a bit more in depth than that. So give it a try, get out with a spade and see what good you're doing, and make sure that you're getting beneath the compacted area before getting on for the whole field. Just a word on controlled traffic farming, really. It's often seen to be it should really be a no-brainer that your combine is in multiples of your sprayer at the least. So if you've got a 9-meter sprayer, can you have a 36-meter 9-meter combine? Can you have a 36-meter sprayer? Always the challenge for the combine manufacturers is the length of the unloading auger and getting the grain out. But you can see that kits are available. The combine manufacturers are coming around to this now. Stronger turrets, stronger grain tanks. It really does help when you've got to get the grain off the field somehow. And if the trailer and tractor can go down the same pathway as the combine has just gone down, then it makes obvious sense. But is it a complete system? Do you need to buy the drill? And you can see here, this is a fairly meaty drill, 9-meter Sumo DTS. This sort of equipment isn't cheap, and you need a fairly meaty tractor here. You can see it's, I think, as a quad track 475 to pull this Sumo, and at 50 horsepower a meter, it's got a fair job on. It worked well, this particular system. The speed was pegged below 10k, so there was little soil wash, and it produced a really nice finish to the field and really good establishment. So it can work, but it's a significant investment when you get to towards into the ballpark of buying a 9-meter drill or more, as the case may be. Just on that point, I will mention makes and models and drills and tractors and that sort of thing. It isn't me recommending them; it's just me giving them a bit of context, so they're you understand where I'm coming from. The other thing, whilst we're moving on from controlled traffic farming, one of the things that we came across that we thought we wanted to explain in this guide was restructuring tram lines. And on the right, you can see that there's a tractor here with a 2-leg subsoiler, and you can see the two legs are directly behind the wheels and directly in the middle of the tram lines, and they will have the effect of pushing compacted soil out and away from the tram lines. Seems like the right thing to do, but if your tram lines are going back pretty much where they were, I'm not talking about controlled traffic or anything on RTK, but especially around a headland, it's got your headland tram line is invariably going to end up back where it was last year. When it gets wet, when the soil wets up again, the likelihood is that your sprayer, your tractor that's going around the tram lines, will reinstate the ruts that you're trying to get rid of. So in a better way, really, the left-hand illustration, it doubles the amount of subsoiler legs, and it pushes soil in towards the tramline pathway rather than busts it out away. So you should get a bit more resistance to re-establishing the ruts in your field. It's going to push the soil in towards the ruts if you need to address any ruts in the field. So yeah, it's a bit more of a perceived wisdom really on that one. Talking about tire pressures then and ruts and so forth, I thought I'd just talk to you about the Terranimo website. This is a website where you can click on the country. You can see that it's fairly European, this, and then you click through onto your implement and tractor combination. You can choose your tire combination, your wheel load, and get an idea of what damage or not your tires, your chosen tires, are going to do to your soil at different soil moisture content and in different soil makeup. So the more clay, and if it's very wet, then it's more vulnerable to compaction. So I just thought I'd take you through an example really that I did a few months ago. And I looked at a typical self-propelled sprayer, 4,000 litre sprayer with either a 24 or 36 metre spray boom, unfolded. And these are the sorts of typical weights you can see on a sprayer of this size. So you've got the actual weights there, boom unfolded, and we'll take the total weight and of the sprayer. We'll take the front axle boom unfolded and rear axle boom unfolded, and take them forwards with 3 different tire sizes. So row crops, you can see at the top here. 380, 90, R50. So big row crop, big tall row crop tire. The pressure in the front 1.6 bar, in the rears 3.8, and this is from the tire manufacturer specifications for holding this kind of weight. Intermediates 520, 85, 38, and you can see the tire pressures there, 1.8 on the rear, 1.2 on the front, and flotation 627 to 38. The idea is that you can plumb in these types of numbers and produce a chart like this to give you an idea of the soil compaction that you're going to see. So there's another chart there that you can see, and you can see that where we got the front axle sprayer for the sprayer. You've got the depth here, so you've got the soil surface at the top, then 10 centimeters. I'm online, I have to go. All right. Where are we? So we've got the 10 and 20 centimeters, and you can see that this line here is the amount of soil damage that these wheels are doing on a reasonable clay soil at a moist setting. So we've got dry, moist, and wet, and so I've gone for moist really across the board, and you can see the amount of soil damage that we've got going on here. And so when the line really gets into the red, that means that the soil capacity to support the tire's weight is not there, and we're getting ruts. The machine is sinking. On the intermediates, we've got 520, 85s, and you can see there that the load on the soil is less, Then we've got less soil damage going on. It's still on the front axle, producing a little bit of compaction, and it's not quite holding the soil up. And on the rear axle again, it's pretty bad. You can see there on both illustrations here that the soil is compacting out of the way. It's not able to hold the weight. And then moving on to the flotations. And to be fair, 620, 70, 38 isn't that wide, but it is a tall tire, so it is able to support the weight much better. And you can see that in the same soil condition with a reasonable clay content in a moist soil, then the sprayer is able to run with not too much soil damage. So that works pretty well, really. Right, let's move on. Okay. So that's and so the Terranimo website is interesting. Give it a go, give it a whirl, put your tires in, put your machine combination in. It'll work for tractors, for tracked machines, for tracked combines, for wheel combines, and it's probably something that you wouldn't use every day, but it is something if you're considering a change of machinery and you want to produce less soil damage, then it's something that you can plan your machinery purchases, your machinery changes, and see whether tracks, see whether larger tires would work for you. Oh, I've gone too far. And then just in tire choice, really. We did a roadshow of the use of, or we did a roadshow of tires where we looked at the use of VF tires with high flexation on the sidewalls. That's really worth investigating. Yes, they're more expensive, but all of the manufacturers have VF tires, and they're available through tractor manufacturers as well. So talk to tire manufacturers the next time you get to some in front of some of these guys, and they'll talk you through how running tires at much lower pressures than normally you would think possible is possible. When you talk about VF tires, you might have been thinking about auto inflation systems on a tractor as well, and you kind of start to think, well, is it worth it? Because these VF tires are very capable for holding a load and working without a load as well. They're very flexible. But if you're on the road and you want to head off down the road at 50, 60 kilometers per hour, then potentially an auto inflation system is worthwhile. Certainly on sprayers, perhaps if you want to get real low pressures when you're spraying, then and you want to head off down the road, then it's possibly advantageous if you have the air compressor system to fit to it. But it's worth thinking about. Specify the tallest tire you can get, then go wider, I think is the thing to think about if you're looking at tires. And all of the tire manufacturers have trained staff. They have regional managers and tire specialists that will come on farm when you buy some tires, and possibly even before you buy tires, to talk to you, get you the best performance out of tires. All the major manufacturers will have someone. They'll have weigh cells in the back of their tractor, and they'll be able to weigh your tractor and suggest the best pressures for your tractor setup. The three photographs along the bottom, you can see the John Deere. That's a 6215R. Smallish tires, I'm going to say, for that machine as well. I took a photograph of it. There is evidence of it having duals on it, so it probably could easily get dualed up. But duals are big old heavy things and quite dangerous to handle these days. They're getting bigger units, so they're becoming less popular, I guess. But that's what's probably allowing that tractor to have the tyre size that it's got. The tractor in the middle, a good compromise between traction and compaction. It's not a flotation. It is for heavy duty traction, but it will have a as light a footprint as it can. But I wouldn't say that it's going to allow you to go cultivating in any wetter conditions. It will just spread the weight and have a high tractive effort in the right conditions. And then I took this photograph of the Case Optima in Scotland, Haddington direction, I think, and just noticed that it had VF tyres on. They were set at the right pressures. It hasn't got any front weights on the front. It's a lean pulling machine, and is ideally set up for top work with the equipment it has behind it. And it was nice to see it all nicely set up, ready to go to work. Just a quick mention around ploughing. I don't think ploughing is going anywhere soon. I think a lot of people say that the plough is dead. I put this photograph out of government really because when was the last time you saw a press like that? But it still has its place. And so, but I think that the message is really, if you're going to plough, and especially if it's, and hopefully it's part of a weed control program as well, that you plough well. I think the days of just blacking a field over and it's got stubble sticking out everywhere and it's not really done very well, you can't do it. You can't afford it. You can't. There was little point in ploughing in the first place unless it was ploughed properly. And you know, I've seen people argue that they can't plough. They've got heavy land and they can't plough it effectively, but they can't do much else with it either. But I think you've got to either say definitely plough or not, come out the ground altogether, and think of something else. But it's got to be done well if you're going to go ploughing. So control the speed to produce the best finish. Choose the plough depth to suit the soil type, not tractor capacity. I think we've got an abundance of horsepower available, and you can pull the plough as deep as you like and as fast as you can. It's not really going to produce a job. And you do see some lovely jobs with some big ploughs. I mean, I've seen 12 and 13 furrow ploughs behind a quadtrac doing some lovely work out in Lincolnshire. And so it is perfectly possible to do it. But you've also got to consider when it's available to it, when you can press. Do you press for winter ploughing? Probably not. Do you want to just knock a bit off? Do you want to do a bit of leveling with the press? Get it, if it's going to dry out in the sun, it's probably worth pressing as well. And also consider when, if you need to subsoil, when that can be done. Do you want to do it ahead of the plough or perhaps behind? We've also seen small subsoiler legs fitted to a Lemkin plough and discussed those. It's like having an extra furrow on the back, and the plough is quite difficult to control if you use these subsoiler legs. They are quite effective, and it is a good way of making sure that you don't get a plough pan if you plough quite often. But the subsoiler legs that bolt onto the bottom of the legs are quite difficult to control when you get it in some bodied soil. Deep non-inversion, I think perhaps this is coming out of fashion slightly. I think we're getting into ploughing or we're going into light cultivation, but I thought it would just be worth mentioning. But just consider really knowing the depth of the compaction. Presumably you're going in and you're going after some compaction. You're going to mechanically restructure it, and again get in there with a spade and just make sure that the machine is set to just beneath that compaction. If it doesn't need to go any deeper, then it, you know, even though it can, and even though you have the power, it's probably not worth it. It could be causing more soil damage than doing good. It's important to minimize surface mixing and manage residues. If you've got a lot of weed seed burdens on the soil surface, then you just want to minimize the amount of surface disruption on this. do have a bit of a habit for mixing weed seeds within the whole working depth of the profile, which will give you lots of issues later on in the season. Oops, didn't do that. And so yeah, you can in a broader rotation in veg and potatoes and root crops, it could be just a ticket to get in and amongst a field that's had a fair amount of work done on it, and restructure it and get a crop in pretty quick. And it's a good technique for that. I think this this slide has been around for a few years really, and but I thought it's worth just including, because if you talk about the cultivations and the weed seed burden, then you can see that after harvest, all the freshest weed seeds end up on the soil surface. But if we go straight over to no-till, which is on the right-hand side, you can see even after drilling, even after a no-till drill, you're starting to see some of these weed seeds just get underneath the soil surface. The more longer-term weed seeds will stay there. And what's one of the points of no-till is to keep the weed seeds closer to the surface so that you can manage them sooner. Back over to ploughing, then you can get the new and the old seed buried down, and that's where the importance of ploughing well comes in to play. Deep till can have the effect of mixing the freshest seeds and the old seeds throughout your working profile, which I've just mentioned, that can give you problems with emergence of blackgrass emergence later on in the season. So that's quite an issue. And shallow till, coming into vogue really, is 5 to 10 centimeters and will get a chit, get things growing, and if it suits a later drilling regime, then that's really the thing to do. But again, it will depend on your season and depend on your system and your the way that you want to farm really. Just to touch on the weed cycle, like I said, it's a holistic system these days. It's at what point are you going to tackle your weed seeds, and this is basically the weed cycle, where you've got 4 options or 5 options really to tackle weeds. If we go into the traditional kill weed seedlings with chemistry, you can see in the top left corner, that's the old. Hang on, I just need to sort something out. Right, I'm back. The vagaries of doing this from home. Right, so kill weed seedlings. Then the next step, if you've got mature plants coming through, stop seed set. And I've got the CTM weed surfer there. That's a possible control method. Prevent seed return, which I've got a picture of a class in Suffolk with a chaff deck fitted. So there's a few of these chaff decks turning up in Europe where the chaff is gathered and distributed into 2 rows behind the wheels of the combine. The other option is a seed mill, which is I think there's a seed mill turned up in the country as well, which would destroy all weed seeds as they come out of the combine. Whilst that is a couple of options, you've got the trouble is with that is that there's a good proportion of the amount of weed seeds that are already shelled out onto the ground before the combine gets to it. But in the absence of better ideas and in the new thinking that we're stacking cultural controls, then this is, is going to have to come into play. And then deplete weed seed bank. I can see a no-till drill there and cover crops could be as two tools in cultural stacking that you could use to keep the weed seeds close to the soil surface and keep outcompete weed seeds by cover crops. Right, we're back. The other thing I think we've seen quite a bit of is I think there's a lovely photograph of a Fenton and Varderstadt drill, but look at the seedbed. It's already run together. It's received quite a lot of rain. It's an absolute onion bed, and I think driving around the country, you can quite easily see fields that are tending on the headlands, especially, to get a bit like this, looking a bit sad and a bit sick and a bit airless. So I think it's an issue that we just need to hold back on the seedbed creation, and a knobbly seedbed is not all bad. I think seed depth, it's still 4 centimeters, and of course it's good seed to soil contact, but I think there's a limit about how fine a seedbed for a cereal crop needs to be. And in the last 2 years we've had heavy rain, 2019, 2020, for the last 2 autumns, which have left fields looking a little bit sad and a little bit like this. Your precision farming has gone out the window. There's little point now because there's bigger issues at foot. So I think just keep an eye on the intensity of cultivations. And of course, this Varderstadt has a level of cultivations already. It's a min-till drill, let's not forget. And so there's some more cultivations to come whilst this drill does its job. So I think just review the fineness of some seed beds. If we don't know what kind of winter we're going to get, but if it's going to be another wet one, we're going to see more field headlands looking a little bit like this. I think if we keep continuing with the keenness of fine seed beds. Just a little mention on some work that we're doing at AHDB with DEFRA as well, and looking at the long-term effectiveness of glyphosate within weed control in UK crop conditions. A 5-year project we've been looking at wants to just improve the effectiveness of glyphosate and reduce its instance of resistance. And so some take-home messages really. You need 540 grams of active ingredient per hectare for seedlings, the 2 to 3 leaves, 720 grams per hectare of tillering, and if it's at flowering, then just over 1,000 grams of active ingredient. And as we've always known this, don't skimp on the rates if you want to get a full kill. Strangely, I used to work for, well, not so strangely, but I used to work for Monsanto in the 90s, and temperature of water when you mix in glyphosate can have an effect on its efficacy. So if you've got really cold water coming out of a borehole or from your going into your spray tank, it can have an impact. So that's just something to think about. If it's been sitting in a browser for a couple of days in the sun, that would be ideal. But it is a consideration. And then the maximum of 2 glyphosate applications per stale seedbed is the best really for reducing the risk of survivors. But there is a link if you Google glyphosate resistance, AHDB glyphosate resistance, you'll be taken to this the full research, and you can look at it at your leisure. Other resources, really, weed management. We've got a couple of new publications out, or not so much new, but they're available as HTML. They've only just become available as in this format as opposed to PDF. And again, you can get them as hard copy, managing rotations, and the weed encyclopedia will give you the whole life cycle, and it's a really handy book to have in your truck cab, to be fair. Just a little bit on the basic principles of soil to metal geometry. I thought this was worth just mentioning here. If we look at the drill, the Claydon drill on the left, I'm not suggesting one drill is better than the other here, but I just wanted to talk about the different designs of drill and the different way that these machines operate. Neither one is wrong, but it just shows you know what to expect. In the middle, you've got the rake angle as an intermediate rake angle. The two drills, you can I've got an intermediate rake angle on the two tines here. You've got a disc at the front on this drill on the right. Then you've got, with the rolling action of a disc on the disc on the right, you do have a high rake angle, and you have a compressive effect. So if it's slightly damp, then the disc tends to push down clods, which might be a good thing, might push down stones, which is a good thing. But you just need to be aware of that. Then you've got the intermediate rake angle of the tine behind the disc should rectify that and leave you a good seed zone in which to put some seeds in. Same thing with the drill on the left. You can see it's got a very low rake angle, and so it have a lift and loosening effect. So if you think about your soil type, if you think about do you have a slumpy soil? Do you have something that's easily compacted? Does it lay wet? Then you can get to understand that the disc might work well in a calcareous, free draining soil. But if you want a great deal of flexibility, then a drill with a low rate angle and a lift loosen type of setup like this Claydon, then that might work and give you more flexibility. Of course, it's going to leave it loose, perhaps, and I wouldn't be afraid of doing a roll after drilling in any of these situations. Direct drilling, there's been lots of discussion around direct drilling. Just to be clear, from my point of view, it's a one-pass establishment, but then there's two types that come underneath it. Cultivated drill, where you've got some movement, some soil movement, and that's desirable. Might be on a soil that just likes a move, likes to be moved. And then there's a no-till drill, which is still direct drilling, but of course there's no soil movement whatsoever. So so it depends on your system. It depends on your thought processes. Whether what we're seeing is that no-till really is quite a specialist operation and takes quite a sizable change in your system to make it work well. You can see the top photograph is taken in Driffield, Sumo DTS behind a 718 vent, I think, 4-meter drill. Works well, goes straight in, flexible system. It was on the wet side, I have to say, when this tractor was working, and there's a potential that you could set it a little bit deep, bringing some wet up from beneath, but it's a flexible system. The cross slot you can see is going straight into a stripper-headed field of wheat. I think this was drilling oilseed rape, and that sort of system will work well. The key thing, I think, with the stripper-headed system is that your trash and crop material, your crop residue, is still anchored to the ground. It's still going to draw through the drill, so it will hang in there. It's not going to get bunged up in amongst the drill and cause you problems. I think that's a very important thing to say, that if you can get the longer the stubble, the more straw you've still got anchored to the ground, the more likelihood you're going to get on better. Just a direct draw selection, really. We thought we'd go through this a little bit. All of this information is available in the document I've just spoke about at the head of this meeting. Residues. Think about whether are you going to have residues. What are you going to drill into? Is your drill going to work through residues? Is it going to be loose material on the top, or is it going to be something different? Soil conditions. Think about your soil condition. Is it predominantly damp? Are you in the Cumbria area where it's going to lay a little bit damp, or are you on the Essex coast where it's going to be dry? Discs tend to cut the soil, consolidate it around the seed area, but tines will loosen and sort out aggregates. So if your soil is consolidatable, by that I mean it's damp and you've got few days when it's really dry, then that's perhaps something to think about, and go into the tine instead. Nutrient requirement. It's interesting that your decaying crop residue will start to lock up N. So do you need to put some N on, and are you allowed? And P as well. It's not very mobile. So do you need to put some P down the spout with the seed, or is there enough there if you manage your soil correctly? And that's perhaps something that we'll look into in webinars in the coming months. Disc-based drills cope with high levels of surface residue, but hairpinning can be a problem, and you can get row clearers that just sit in front of the disc unit. If you're going to just clear that away, they can work well to reduce the amount of hairpinning. Hairpinning really is if you get a seed dropped in and it's in a hairpinned environment where your crop residue has encapsulated the seed, you're most likely going to get seedling death, unfortunately. The risk of smear is greater from discs in wet conditions, and there's been a bit of discussion just recently where if you run the gauntlet, let's say, of drilling later in the back end of October, in early November, then it starts raining and you get out there with a disc drill, it might not work. And someone said to me that ideally, if you've got a no-till disc drill, you want to be blowing it off with an airline, blowing the dust off it. If you're pressure washing the thing to get the mud off it, then you can expect poor establishment in the coming months. And I thought that was quite an interesting comment. Another comment. I was at a Base UK meeting a few months ago, well, 2 months ago, I suppose. If you're going to get into no-till exclusively, you're probably going to need to think about how to get away from late drilling, especially if there's a blackgrass issue. And this could be as dramatic as bringing your winter wheat establishment forwards, so it's done in good conditions, and that's, I'm not saying that that's going to be possible in every situation, but that then brings into play a lot more spring cropping. And it was suggested that 2 winter wheats in a 6-course rotation is the sort of thing you'd be looking at in a no-till blackgrass controlling situation. Now, I know people throwing their hands up in the air saying, well, I'm not doing that. But if that's the sort of the thinking that was happening at this meeting, I'm not suggesting that's the right thing to do. But if you're dead set on a low disturbance, no till situation, then these are the sorts of challenges that need to be discussed really. Interestingly, the total weight required for disc penetration increases with disc size, and I suppose if you think about it, that would be true, that there'd be more disc area on the ground with larger discs, and then you need more weight to get penetration. So think about the disc size. It's interesting really, and of course there's more, as we've discussed. It's a low rake angle, so you've got a more compressive effect of larger discs in a no-till drill as well, and hugely important. And I think there's a few people being caught out with this, especially in the spring. The drill will run, you can get it to run in early March, fantastic, and then it dries out by May, and the slots that the drill has made by its discs open back up, suspending the seed in midair, and you get seedling death. So it's nerves of steel in the spring. Everyone else is drilling but you, but I think it will pay dividends if you drill in the right conditions, rather than drill as early as you can. So there's nothing wrong with that thinking, but there's plenty to consider with slot closure and not going too late, making sure that you're getting effective slot closure. I thought really then, from the monitor farm network, I thought I'd just put up this slide as well, just as an idea of the drilling costs and soil movement costs that we're seeing across the monitor farm network. The biggest thing here is the range, and you can see the top line drilling pounds per hectare, and this includes tractor, depreciation, drill and depreciation, the driver, the oil, the fuel, the whole gambit, the whole 9 yards is all in. And the lowest price we experienced was £16 a hectare, and I think that was a tine drill, Cavernal tine drill on the back of a 6820 John Deere. Quick, simple, easy system on a tractor that's nicely depreciated, runs well. The highest you can see there is £63 a hectare, and I think there's a big New Holland T7 pulling a 4-meter Vardestat, but it's simply, there's nothing wrong with the system, but it simply didn't have enough hectares to go at, and so there was more of the cost of the equipment was concentrated on fewer hectares. But you can see the average of the mean there is 32 quid for drilling. Of course, drilling comes in many forms. We've got power harrow drill combinations in here, right through to 758 drills, a no-till drill. So, but you can see the idea of the costs there. It doesn't do well to get the lowest costs you can ever get, because that either your equipment isn't big enough because it's spread across too many hectares, or it's so old it might break down. The lowest cost we came across was £9 a hectare with the David Brown 1490 pulling a Massey 30. Absolutely fine if you want to sit in it, but you're risking breakdowns, and you're risking missing vital windows. But you can see ploughing there ranging from £40 a hectare up to 97. 40 quid was a Fendt 936 pulling a 7-furrow semi-mounted Cavernland, double shifted. So I think it ploughed over 1,000 hectares a year. Major operation. But at the other end of the scale, you've got a cost of £97 per hectare, and it was a 5-furrow plough that sat in the shed as a reset button for blackgrass, for rotational or opportunistic ploughing, and that's what it did. Is that too expensive? Should it be sold? Probably not, but it's got a very important job, and if it's used correctly, it's probably doing okay. So there's no real difference or no real issues with many of these costs, I would suggest. Again, looking at establishment costs in a different way, these are the 20 monitor farms, or 20 of the many monitor farms that we've worked with over the years. And I thought I'd just talk out a few of the farms that we've got here. So if you look at the numbers along the bottom, that's the 20 farmers. On the left-hand side column, we've got costs of establishments in pounds per hectare, and the yield is the line, the black line, zigzag line, ranging between just under 8 tons, 7 tons, up to 11. You can see there. The lowest establishment cost, and if you just run your eyes along the bottom line, you'll come to Farmer 9. That's a Fendt 936 5-meter McConnell disc aerator. That came in at £15.50 per hectare. He then went in with the drill. It was a Fendt 724 with a Horsch Pronto DC 6-meter, £15 a hectare, and then rolled it with a 718 Fendt and Opico rolls. So really, you can't say that's low disturbance, but it is low cost, and it was just above what been on for the top 8s of 10 tons per hectare in that particular year. The next Farmer 12, if you run your eyes along and get to 12, then that is one of our farmers using a John Deere 7530 tractor with a Claydon 4.8 meter drill, £27.40 per hectare, and then rolling with a 6620 John Deere and Claydon 12 meter rolls at £5.10. Cheap system. And attention to detail is needed, but he's getting 10 tons per hectare. So you can manage it. The thinking that the lower the disturbance will reduce your yields, or the lower the cost, the lower the impact will reduce yields. It can be challenged, to be fair. And just a Farmer 4, number 4. What was he? John Deere 8360R 4-wheel tractor, pulling a Missouri Protel 4-meter, £50 a hectare there. Pricey, but still cheaper than a lot of the guys with quite a few operations to get. So there's lots to discuss, I think, and you can see that the reduction in tillage doesn't necessarily mean a reduction in yield. I'll just skim over these really, because time is getting on, and we'll get on to some questions. But look after your depreciation. Machines kept longer than 7 years. We're doing well on the depreciation. You don't always have to have the newest equipment. You can, if you look after your oldest equipment, it can still achieve low repairs, which is what you want to be doing really. Prolong your replacement policy. So buy right, buy once, I think is what you know to be looking at. Low diesel usage. For us, for the monitor farms, the top 25% of the monitor farms use less than 100 litres of fuel per crop hectare on average. And that's from your first pass after the combine through to the grain being delivered to store. So it does not include pushing up and does not include drying, importantly. And 100 litres should be achievable, I think, for anyone. We're getting guys that are reporting less, sub 50 litres per hectare for establishment for all of the spray applications, fertilizer, and combining as well. So 100 litres is a starting point, but I think it can come down below that as well. And I don't think I'll go too much on with combines. More than that, I need to. So further reading and getting involved. I appreciate that a lot of this has been about reducing cultivation. I think government policy in the next few years will encourage the reduced soil movement in every farm, and we don't know yet whether we'll get funding for no-till or reduced till, or will you be measured on your carbon content and how much that has gone up. But the whole carbon capture thing is very key at the moment. So I think all of this is worth keeping an eye on. keeping your ear to the ground. But to begin with, really, if you want to start thinking about reducing your tillage intensity and whilst maintaining yield, there's some good publications out there that you're probably worth getting involved with. I think the first one is a few years old now. It was produced by the Worshipful Company of Farmers. Professor Dick Goldwyn wrote it. It's the potential of no-till systems for arable farming. It's a very good book. It's a very good read. I would. It is. If you Google that title, you'll get it in PDF form. And it's. If you're thinking of heading that direction, there's some good thoughts and writings in there. It's really worth a look. Base UK, a very active membership organisation. If you're not a member already and you're looking to make more from your soil and get involved, then it's a very active group of farmers and agronomists, and it really does take you down some scientific routes, and they get some great speakers involved. It's a great organisation. Nothing to do with AHDB, but nevertheless, Neil Fuller from Lincolnshire got involved with Good Soil Guide, and it's a web-based guide that you can sign up to, and there's an awful lot of information in that. It's well written. Like I say, Neil Fuller was behind it, so it's a really good guide, I've got to say. From AHDB, we've got the Farm Excellence Programme, where we've got strategic farms, which I haven't mentioned yet, but we've got David Miller in Hampshire, who is into regenerative agriculture. Like it or loathe it, he would tell everybody that if you don't reduce your costs and reduce your input costs and start getting your soil to work for you, then you're going to run out of money to farm with within the next few years. The same for David Aglen in Scotland, again a regenerative farmer, got a no-till drill running in Scotland, which was unheard of 10 years ago. I've had people tell me that no-till is impossible north of the Tweed, or north of the Tyne even, and this guy's doing it. So it's very interesting picking up on what these guys are doing and how these guys are making this work. And I think it takes some mindset which we want to tap into, and we'll come between us all. We'll come up with some interesting work and ideas about how that might be delivered. If you want to get into costings, which I'm afraid you probably do need to if you're not already, Farm Bench is a very good program, a very good system from AHDB to provide firstly costings for your own farm, and you can just do that in the privacy of your own home, and you can look at the top, middle and bottom of your region and decide where the costs might be getting a little bit too high for your liking. And if you wanted to take it a little bit further, you can opt to join a benchmarking group where 6-8 businesses sit around the table, and it's almost you take your financial clothes off in public, and you look at your costs together, and you get some really lively conversations about all of your costs and your spends and your incomes, importantly as well. Are you getting the best from your marketing of your grain, your straw? Are your costs under control, and so on? So there's a lot to be gained from engaging with Farm Bench. Two levels: either you can do it just yourself, or you can join a benchmarking group and get some real value out of it. Probably one of the perhaps the best kept secrets, and perhaps the most underused things, are Nuffield reports. We've AHDB and the HDCA funded a number of them, and these are just two that sprung to my mind. One from Russ McKenzie, No Till in Any Conditions, and it's a really, it's full of information. It's information dense. It's a really good read, and it's written by a farmer, and the farmer wants you to read it and wants it to work. And then Tom Sewell, back in the days of the HDCA, moving from sustainable to regenerative agriculture using the no-till system. That was from July 2014, and people think that regenerative ag is new. Well, you know, it's 8 years old here, but I think it's good reading. And if you want to just think about how you're going to run your farm and your soil in the future, then I think that's very well worth getting involved with. Agroecology, certainly organisation that have a wealth of information on their website. Huge amount of information across cereal crops and livestock enterprises as well. And there's no end of information that you can peruse and get an understanding from. And the machinery cost calculator. So there's a feeling that if you change your drill system, you need the same size drill, but do you really? If you've got more time, if you've got a direct drill and you just achieve a one-pass drill system, then do you need such a big drill? Can you get away with a smaller drill and importantly a lighter tractor, and you can have a wider window? You're probably migrating towards a wider rotation as well. So I think that's something that you can just put some costs in, put some hectareages in, put some hours in that you expect to work, and you can produce a cost of your expected machinery bill, which is very interesting and very handy. If you don't like the numbers, you can either change the size of the drill, alter the cost, and you can produce the numbers that would work for you. So what time is it? It's 17 past 8. So that's it from me. Let's see if I can bring up some questions. There we are. So let's have a look. Okay. Let's put my glasses on as well. So let's have a look. Hang on. There we go. My screen's come back on as well, so you can see that I'm actually a real fella. Let's come over there. So right. So first question is: do you recommend farmers having a textural analysis? Is it something I always do when taking on a new client? Yes, why not? I think there's some research being done in the 70s that suggested that a slumpy soil that is prone to slumping after some weather probably isn't going to work well in a no-till situation. And I think if you have and that's been argued in the past, where if you have the right cover crop mix, then you can probably get away with that sort of with a no-till farming in a slumpy soil. But it's going to take some management, and it's going to take some thought. And the general thought is that the less time you spend in the tractor cab, the more time you spend out walking crops and just generally understanding where you are. So yes, a textual analysis is probably a good thing. Andrew Wilson, let's try and get this expanded a little bit. How do you recommend cover crops without competing weed seeds? I've had better success with thinner covers, allowing weeds grow in them, and then stitching the cash crop in after a pre-drilling glyphosate. For sure, yeah. There's a lot of discussion about allowing air and sunlight to the soil, gets it drier quicker, especially in the winter months. So that's certainly possible, and it is what will work for you. Any figures on for carbon footprint to go with your slides and establishments and methods and costs? That's a good one. We probably need a standardized form of carbon counting, and I think if I speak to my colleague Harley Stoddard, he would say he would say that that I think there's over 60 forms of carbon calculators at the moment. So I can see that we do need a standardized form of when people are counting carbon, when they are saving carbon, when they are not. And I don't think that's there yet, because with all of this hoo-ha around carbon capture, the worst thing that's ever going to happen is that we get to 2060 and we realize we haven't captured half the carbon that we thought we were. And so I think, again, that's a thing for government, it's a thing for policy. It's probably a thing for COP26 in two months' time, I think, as well, if we can get that in there. Where can we access benchmarking groups? If you Google AHDB Farm Bench, you can sign up to the Farm Bench program and have a look, and then we can notify you if there's a group nearby you. There's two parts to it, really. There's a facilitated farm bench group that's done by local consultants, Brown Co, Ceres Rural, those sorts of guys, and they could get you sorted. Or there's some local groups as well that we run ourselves, and you could become part of that. So yeah, just Google it and go from there. Do you know the Twitter names for people who you suggest are thinking of long-term for their soils? As there are people out there. I think what I'll do, I can see who's asked this. I can send you a ruck of Twitter names that you can engage with and follow. And Twitter is a useful thing. You can pick up an awful lot of information. Sometimes you find that people only share the best looking fields and their worst fields are never seen of, so you have to be aware of that. But I can do that. Yeah, we can do that. One agronomist recommends late drilling for blackgrass weed control. The other agronomist recommends early drilling for good crop establishment. What should I do? That's a good one. I think this has only come to the fore because of late drilling has become a bit of a game of nerves of steel. By the time you get to the mid-October, is it going to start raining and not stop? Blackgrass has to come first, and I think if you're driven by blackgrass, it's going to be a longer rotation. I think that spring crops need to come into play, and spring crops back to back need to come into play if you've got a blackgrass issue, and that's going to drive a reduction in your costs. And I think that's something that should come into the thought processes of all farmers, that they need a reduction in their costs and their capabilities. I think the days of 2 weeks in the rape are well and truly over. Everybody knows that, but I think that the equipment and dare I say that the labour are still aimed to have 3 weeks of intensive work in mid-August when you're in the wheat harvest, whereas now you're probably going to have 4, 5, 6 crops in a rotation. So big time spring crops. If you're going into late drilling, then that's fine. But for good crop establishment, you're going to have to go into good conditions, and you can't, I don't think, rely on very late drilling into November is dodgy, really. So expect to get into spring cropping. If I don't get any of these questions, because I'm just going to do a time check here, we've got 25 minutes to go. Oh, sorry, it's 25 minutes past, so we've got another 5 minutes or so. If we will answer these questions, I think, as they come in. Let's have a look. In a no-till system, how are people controlling volunteers and weeds? Good question. I think that's long rotation again. I think there is an issue. There's nothing worse than seeing barley turning up in a winter wheat system, but it's usually by predation of crops and long rotations, I'd say. Let's just scroll down a bit. I think we're getting about there. Good old David Brightman. Could you comment on a suitable system for the heavier soils, 60 to 80% clay content, which needs permanent under drainage and regular mold drainage to prevent waterlogging, which is not conducive to healthy soils? It's a difficult one, David, as you well know. You on the first glance, you'd think that a no-till system would work, but on that sort of system, I don't know that it would. It should self-restructure, but if it's laying wet, it might not see enough dry. So I think that might need a cultivation as well. And as an opportunistic ploughing, as you'd say, probably needs to come into play as well. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't know that there's a system out there, but I'd be welcome to be corrected. Well, it's 27 minutes past. I think we've come to the end of it. Really, it's an hour and a half if you listen to me talk. I think thank you very much for listening. I hope it's been interesting. I'm sorry about the dog and people turning up halfway through, but there you go. That's the vagaries of working from home. But as I close this, there is a survey. If you could fill it in and comment as you please. We will use it. We do use it as good feedback. And if you want to hear any other topics, cover crops, nutrition, I think are probably already in the mix, but just reinforce it if you want to hear about those as well. Then we can certainly do that. But from me, it's nearly 8:30. I'm going to sign out and say thank you very much for listening, and catch you next time. Bye bye.